Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we're just 4 days away from the Eagles season opener against the Detroit Lions. We're going to continue to get you ready. I want to talk about Jason Kelce's comments today on expectations versus reality, and if Miles Sanders, the 2019 top-tier receiving running back, is ever going to show up in 2022. All that and more on a loaded Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday edition of the podcast, Monday through Friday. A podcast for you on your beloved Philadelphia Eagles on all podcast platforms, on YouTube as well, and on Twitter. Hit us up at Locked On Birds and at DBLCLOE. Today's episode is brought to you by Brightco Jewelry and Watch Insurance. Brightco brings you comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance for as low as $5 per month. Check out your special offer for Locked On listeners and get covered in under 2 minutes at bright.co/lockedon. That's bright.co/lockedon. We are only a few days away from the Eagles season opener against the Detroit Lions. We have crossover Thursday tomorrow with Matt Derry of Locked On Lions, and then we have our betting episode on Friday. We have our LOE3. We're going to try to make you some money at betonline.net in this Eagles-Lions matchup and the entire NFL landscape, the matchup starting tomorrow with Bills-Rams. What an amazing first game between, I think, the two best teams maybe in the NFL right now, and then all of the games on Sunday, including Eagles-Lions kickoff set for 1 o'clock, and I think it's a perfect matchup for the Eagles to hopefully start things off with a win. I think they're going to wear white on white in Detroit. I really do hope they wear white on black, though. Start things off on the right foot. They never lose in black. In white on black last year, which they brought in for the first time in franchise history, they were undefeated with that jersey combination. So there's your jersey analysis for the day. Eagles should wear white on black. I would predict they probably wear white on white. Last year in Detroit, and pretty much every time they've been in Detroit since I can remember, they've worn white on green, right? Here goes Lou's crazy jersey analytics mind. Last year, they wore white on green. I know in 2016, they wore white on green. So pretty much every time they're in Detroit, that's the look. Thanksgiving as well. In 2015, they wore white on green. So there you go. Didn't even think we were going to talk jersey stats today, but you never know what you're going to get on Locked On Eagles. We got a show 5 days a week, so there's going to be some nonsense that gets thrown in there. But something that's not nonsense, and somebody that's not having any nonsense, is Jason Kelce. This guy just understands the city of Philadelphia. He is literally the new Brian Dawkins when it comes to just somebody that perfectly represents the city of Philadelphia on the field and off the field. I loved what he talked about today in his press conference because somebody asked him about all these Super Bowl expectations for the Eagles. I saw Matt Lombardo today. He said he interviewed a bunch of NFL executives, and the majority of those executives picked the Eagles to not only be like a top-tier contender this year that wins the NFC East. You've seen a ton of people. I think the majority of the national media is now picking the Eagles to win the East or even win a playoff game and go deep into the postseason. But the majority of NFL executives that Lombardo interviewed had the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. The national media, local media, fans, us, we have every reason to hype this team up. They are one of, if not the most talented rosters in the NFL, but I love Jason Kelce of all people today. He's exactly the guy because it resonates with him. You know it's real, and the team's going to listen to him, the media's going to listen to him, the fans. He's the perfect guy to talk about pulling expectations back, knowing that expectations really don't mean anything. That's what he said today in more derogatory ways, throwing some swear words around that I love, but cannot say on this show. And I love that Kelce said it, not only because, like I said, he represents Philadelphia. He's one of the biggest voices in this locker room, a long-term leader that knows how to get it done, has won a Super Bowl, is a Hall of Famer, but also because this is a guy that knows what hype can do to a team, preseason hype. When it gets to your head and you feel like you made it before you made it. Jason Kelce said today, the Eagles haven't won anything. They haven't won expletive, is what he said. They're not the champs. they better come in and work their butts off. I love that quote because it's so true. And I think a lot of teams that he's been on in the past, maybe that did get to them. And if it didn't, at least the media and fans maybe overhyped that team. And Kelsey saw that with, the 2012 team that was supposed to redeem the failed dream team. He saw it in 2015 when a lot of people were hyping up the new look team that Chip Kelly put together. All of those teams after the Super Bowl season in 2017 failed to meet high expectations, still made the playoffs, weren't nearly as disappointing as those other teams I brought up, but again, struggled and weren't the team that everybody said they were in the offseason. So Jason Kelce has been through it before. He knows what it takes. He's been through the good and he's been through the bad. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of Eagles teams that weren't expected to be great ended up being great. Kelce talked about that today when he said, when you come in the season, not that they shouldn't have confidence, like this team is not dumb. They know, Hassan Riddick said it, I think today or yesterday, that this is the most talented defense he's ever been on in the NFL, and that's including a loaded Carolina Panthers defense last year, a good Arizona Cardinals team as well before that, where he was drafted. So I'm not saying, and he wasn't saying this team shouldn't have confidence and believe in each other and know what this team can do. Brandon Graham even said it himself. They see the talent around here. They want to win a Super Bowl. They know that they have that kind of ceiling, but they're not getting too caught up in that. Jason Kelce wants this team to have a mindset like they did last year when they were 2-5. He talked about how when you're a team that's great, sometimes when you're in the film room and you're looking at mistakes, you're kind of more 50-50 about it. You're like, yeah, we could have did better there, but we'll figure it out. There's less urgency. And he said, though, when you're 2-5 and you're a losing team, you're saying to yourself, we got to figure it out right now. We have to correct that right now, or else, he said, everybody's going to lose their jobs. They're going to have players and coaches and front office members, scouts out on the streets. So Kelce, I like that he kind of reined things in right now because this week especially, the hype is getting real. And that's going to happen when everybody's doing their predictions. We did our predictions podcast on Monday. Gino and I as well have the Eagles as a top 3 seed in the NFC. We have them winning the NFC East. I have them winning a playoff game against a really good 49ers team and making it to the second round. Gino has the Eagles making it to the NFC Championship game. So the hype is real, and I think it's justified right now on paper. But Kelce knows, Howie Roseman knows, this entire team that's been through it before knows they've got to do it on the field. And I trust this team to meet the expectations that past Eagles teams have not. They have the coaching staff that preaches day by day, every day. They've got Kelce, they've got Fletcher Cox, they've got Brandon Graham, they've got Lane Johnson, they've got guys that have done it before, that have seen what it takes to get it done and what doesn't get it done. And I think they have one of the most mature young cores that has the same kind of mindset. Guys that came from winning programs like Alabama and Georgia, Devontae Smith, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Landon Dickerson, your quarterback, and Jalen Hurts. They know what it takes, and I trust that this team will meet those expectations. I am more worried about them failing to meet expectations based on the field play, especially at the quarterback position. That's where I doubt this team can be a Super Bowl contender. Not that they're going to buy into this hype before they deserve it and get too big of heads where they're just blowing smoke. I don't think that's a part of why I would doubt this team for sure. And Jason Kelce is a huge reason. And by the way, he's going to play on Sunday, which is awesome because the Iron Man streak for Kelce continues. He now has started on Sunday. He will have started his 123rd consecutive game in the NFL. The second highest number for a center in the NFL right now is Joel Bitonio with 81. So he has over 30 more consecutive starts than the next center. And this guy's in his 30s now. Incredible. Nobody is ever going to wear number 62 again. I cannot wait to see him on the field on Sunday. And guys, everybody looks like they're going to play. The entire team practiced today. There was only a few limited participants. Miles Sanders was a full go. He's been out for a few weeks with a hamstring injury. Javon Hargrave was also limited with the injury that he's been nursing this summer. Derek Barnett as well. But this entire team is all those guys are expected to play today. And man, if I could go back in time and show 2018 to 2020 Lou, that kind of injury report, that kind of promise, He'd be crying tears of joy. I don't know for our video members, if you see me crying up in this picture on my wall when they won the Super Bowl, he'd be doing that again. He'd be crying tears of joy because this team is healthy and ready to go. I am so excited for the season to come up. Sunday, kickoff at 1 o'clock. And I did mention Miles Sanders before. I want to get into Miles Sanders coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles because I believe that Sanders gets a lot of undeserved criticism, and I'm really excited to see if he can shut people up this year. But there is one part of his game that I really want to come back that was there his rookie year in 2019. So that's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's podcast is sponsored by Brightco. Engagements are a big deal. Guys always want to get it right with the right ring and the right place to do it. My best friends got engaged at our lake house we go to every summer. It was beautiful. My brother got engaged in the mountains of Sedona in Arizona, where our parents live. Another beautiful moment for them. While many get ambitious with those kind of settings, it does come with more risks towards that ring. Could you imagine if my friend dropped the ring in a 400-foot deep lake where submarines are tested, Seneca Lake in New York? Or if my brother dropped the ring down a giant mountain? You don't want to be that guy. If you are, our friends at Brightco will get you a replacement for the full value of your last ring, no matter if it's lost, stolen, or you just don't know what the hell happened to it. Go to brightco.com/lockedon. It's the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to cover yourself. These guys at Brightco are geniuses. They made covering your ring, watch, or whatever so easy. You can get it covered in 2 minutes over the phone. You won't find a better deal on great coverage that is super affordable. Go to bright.co/lockedon. That's bright.co/lockedon. All right, Eagles fans, we thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. This is a Wednesday edition of the show. 2 more podcasts to go, and then a Saturday full of college football that separates us from Eagles-Lions Sunday at 1 o'clock. We also have Bills-Rams tomorrow night, so we get NFL football in just less now than 24 hours from when I'm recording this podcast. But we're getting you ready on this show for Eagles-Lions. And I mentioned the injury report, or lack thereof an injury report for the Birds right now. Somebody that did show up was Miles Sanders, but he was a full participant in practice on Wednesday afternoon, dealing with that hamstring injury over the last few weeks. Sanders looks like he is going to play against the Lions. And I think Sanders, he gets a lot of, I think, incorrect criticism. If you're going to criticize Sanders for being injured a lot and not being available all the time, that I totally agree with. He's missed 4 games in back-to-back years, 8 games over the last 2 seasons. But when people get mad about his performance as if he's the second-round bust that never met expectations because he's not a 1,400-yard rusher, you know, that's the thing. I see those takes too. It's not just the injury talk. I agree with the injury talk, but some people say Sanders has not lived up to the billing of a second-round pick. Maybe so because of his position and the injuries, but I don't think it has to do with performance. Even if he was healthy, this isn't going to be a guy that's rushing for 1,300 yards a year. Even last year, in a run-first offense, the Eagles want to throw the football. In the modern-day NFL, you rotate running backs unless you're the Tennessee Titans. And Jalen Hurts runs the football last year more than any quarterback in the NFL. Sanders is not going to have those kind of numbers. That doesn't mean that he isn't that caliber of player. That doesn't mean he's not a 1,300-yard talent at running back. Sanders, to me, is that guy when he plays. He's one of a few running backs to average over 5 yards a carry the last 3 years. He's one of the most efficient running backs in football when he's on the field. He's one of the most explosive running backs in the NFL as well. I mean, he constantly rips off 70-plus yard touchdown runs like he's Deshaun Jackson. I mean, 2 years ago, he was the Deshaun Jackson of the running back position. And in 2019, he was that guy as a receiver for Deshaun Jackson when he went down. The Eagles needed somebody to make up for the explosive plays, and it wasn't Nelson Aguilar. It was a rookie Miles Sanders. And that is where I do agree with some, maybe not criticism, but for some need for improvement or a wanting to get Sanders back to where he was his rookie year. Because I don't think Sanders needs to get back to who he was in 2019 as a running back. Yeah, he was amazing down the stretch his rookie year. Without Sanders, you're not winning the NFC East. But to me, I think he's gotten better as a more decisive runner year after year. I thought the second half of last season, that was the most decisive running back I've seen, the most decisive version of Sanders in 3 years. But where I do want to see Sanders return to his 2019 form is as a receiver. He had 50 catches that year for over 500 yards. He was one of the most explosive receiving running backs in football, whereas the last 2 years, he's only had 28 receptions in 2020 and then 26 receptions last year. In both years, he did not have over 200 yards receiving. I don't think that he's gotten worse as a receiver compared to 2019. I think there's been some drop issues, but I don't think that's a problem nearly as much as people say either. I think he only had one drop last year. So I think I agree with people that he needs to get back to being that kind of multi-dimensional threat, but I think it's going to happen through other ways. It's not based on him catching the ball better or anything about him performance-wise. I think he can still be that receiving running back if a few factors don't hold him back. One, of course, like I said, is injuries. He played in 4 fewer games in 2020 and 2021 versus 2019. He played in all 16 games. So for me, with his health, that's the biggest thing, because if you add even just a catch or two over 4 games, let's say for last year or in 2020, he had 28 catches. Let's say he has 2 catches a game in 4 extra games. That's, another 8 catches. He's at around 36 to 40 receptions on the year. That's only 10 less than in 2019. Is he going to average, 10 yards, 10.2 yards per reception like he did in 2019? I'm not so sure. Again, he was a deep threat that year, but I think he can get back to that kind of volume and that kind of efficiency. I think also a reason that he's been held back as a receiving running back is there's just been more targets for other players. There's better weapons around Jalen Hurts now than Carson Wentz had in 2019. You got to remember, Deshaun Jackson went down. Alshon Jeffrey went down. Nelson Aguilar was hurt for a lot of that season. You only had Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. You had Deontay Burnett out there, Greg Ward, Robert Davis, Joshua Perkins. Carson Wentz needed Miles Sanders to be his explosive playmaker on the ground and through the air. It wasn't just Sanders, but it was Boston Scott too. In 2021, at least, maybe not 2020, but 2021, Sanders, there's been more targets to share when it comes to the passing game. Also, another reason those numbers have been decreased is Jalen Hurts runs a lot more than Carson Wentz did. And by running, I mean running over the line of scrimmage. Jalen Hurts makes it harder for a Sanders type of running back to get check down receptions. So I don't think Sanders has been a bad receiver. I just think a lot of those factors have held him back from getting that 2019-like workload. And I think some of those things are going to remain the same. Hurts is a mobile quarterback. There's even more weapons this year than last year with A.J. Brown coming to town. But I think, again, even with that being said, if he just can stay healthy, I think he can match those totals. And I think he will. Where I want to see it get better is actually maybe the yards per reception. Again, in 2019, it was 10.2. The last 2 years, it was 7.0 in 2020 and then 6.1 last year. I would like to see the Eagles try to get him, in space more against linebackers. Less just check down receptions. Get him on wheel routes like you did the beginning of the season in 2019. Doug Peterson loved to get Sanders open down the sidelines. That's the part I would like to see back. I think if he stays healthy, the numbers are going to come back as a receiver. But I do think the yards per reception could be better based on how they scheme him. I'm not sure if Kenneth Gainwell is going to dip into that because he's a guy that played receiver a lot at Memphis. But maybe, like we said on the podcast a couple weeks ago, they play more 21 personnel this year. And there's times where you split Sanders out and you try to get him mismatches and Gainwell to make up for a lack of a dangerous 12 personnel package. Regardless, I want to see those numbers come back from where they were in 2019. And I would love to see, again, maybe you don't get to 10.2 yards per catch if you're Sanders, but maybe get, again, 6.1 last year. I'd like that to be higher. 7 in 2020, I'd like that to be higher. I want to see some more explosive plays for Sanders in the receiving game, because we know when you get him going downfield on the second and third level, in the running game or the receiving game, he can take any play to the house. So I want to see Nick Sirianni try it, and it's going to be tough to feed all these mouths on this offense, including Hurts running the football, but I do want to see the Eagles try to get that version of Sanders back in the receiving game. Absolutely. Guys, today's episode of Locked On Eagles is sponsored by Prize Picks Daily Fantasy. Prize Picks Daily Fantasy is my go-to I'm a big traditional fantasy guy, but daily's been kind of all the rage the last few years. I'm ready to win big this regular season with Prize Picks. I'm going to take the over maybe on A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith this week. Should I hammer the over on Miles Sanders as a receiver? Should I put my money where my mouth is? Either way, here's how Prize Picks works. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing with anybody either. It's just you versus the projection. Prize Pick offers projections on any sport you watch. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and they have safe and fast withdrawals as well. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks is going to give you $100 back. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. We thank so much Prize Picks Daily Fantasy for sponsoring Locked On Eagles today. All right, Eagles fans, Louis DiBiase wrapping up this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thank you so much for making LOE your first listen each and every day. Wrapping up the show, I just want to give a shout out to Eagles fans. So the Eagles-Lions game this Sunday at 1 o'clock is completely sold out. And for the first time in Detroit since 2019, only standing room tickets are available. Yes, the Lions are getting a lot of hype right now from Hard Knocks. Everybody loves their coaching staff, Dan Campbell, Mark Brunell, Deuce Staley, Kelvin Shepard, a bunch of former players, a bunch of great player-friendly guys. I think they are setting an amazing culture in Detroit, even though the roster is still not very talented at all. I still think they're going to be one of the worst teams in football this year. They're building something for sure, and I think Detroit is recognizing that, and I think they're getting a little excited. And they ended the year last season 3-3. They lost a lot of games by only 1 possession, so I'm trying to give my respect to Detroit a little bit because I did drag them on that Tuesday show this week, and I wrote an article for Fox 43, kind of using the Lions as a basis for why we should be grateful to be Eagles fans. So I feel a little bad. I love the loyalty of that fan base, so that's part of why this game sold out. But also, Eagles fans, so damn proud of you. Eagles fans travel better than maybe any fan base. I've been to a lot of road games, and I can attest to it. Last year, I was at that Panthers game in Charlotte, and it felt like a home game with the Eagles. I was sitting in a section where I would say 90%, it was like hundreds of Eagles fans around, and the Panthers fans were just getting swarmed out. I was in Buffalo a few years ago for that game. So many Eagles fans. I've been to preseason games in Pittsburgh and Cleveland. It feels like anywhere Eagles fans can drive that their team is playing, they're going. Preseason, regular season, heck, if joint practices were open to the public, Eagles fans travel better than maybe any fan base, and they're a huge reason they're shutting down Detroit on Sunday. And again, the expectations are there for the Eagles, and the hype is real. You can feel the excitement level for this fan base right now and this team. Another reason, by the way, though, that tickets are sold out and it's standing room only, probably, is because I saw this. Fox Sports tweeted it out today. They listed the price of beer for every team in the NFL, and the Detroit Lions are tied with the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets for the cheapest beer in the NFL. Each beer in Detroit is sold at only $5 a can, which in the NFL is highway robbery. The Eagles, I think it's $11. Washington, so no wonder Detroit's getting shut down. I'd go too for a $5 beer. Washington is leading the NFL with the most expensive beer, $14 a can. So you're going to go to that dump of a stadium with that bad of a team over the years and pay $14 for a beer, and you're going to need beer to watch the Washington Commanders, especially if the bad version of Carson Wentz comes up this year. Sorry to bash my boy, but he is a rival. $14 for a beer in DC is so bad. No wonder Washington's such a joke. They're maybe the most embarrassing franchise in the NFL. Even I talked about the Detroit Lions, how bad they've been historically, but at least they have their dignity, man. At least it feels like they're on the right path. Washington's charging you $14 for a beer. Detroit, it's $5. Philly fans, Eagles fans saw that and the 7 to 9 hour drive, and they said, let's go. So Detroit's shut down on Sunday. It's going to be a great atmosphere. I think it's going to be a much more competitive game than last year, but I think the Eagles should be heavily favored. We're going to dive deeper into the matchup, though, tomorrow on Crossover Thursday. Matt Derry of Locked On Lions is going to join me for the biggest storylines behind enemy lines for the Lions, and I'll talk about some key matchups for the Eagles as well. We're going to go back and forth tomorrow. First edition of Crossover Thursday. That means the regular season is back. So Eagles fans, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles on all podcast platforms. We are free and available Monday through Friday. And we're available on Twitter as well at DiBiaseLOE and at Locked On Birds. Thanks for making today's edition of Locked On Eagles your first listen. Make sure your second listen is the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022. It's an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one Ultimate NFL Preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thank you so much for downloading Locked On Eagles. Thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.